hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you and thank you for joining us today to this special event. Very excited to see everybody, and we hope that you will enjoy this webinar. My name is Ofer Schreiber. I'm a partner in Wild Ventures. I'm heading our Israeli office. For anybody who's not familiar with Wild Ventures, first of all, you should. And I'm a quick intro about us. We're a global venture capital firm. We have offices in Silicon Valley and in Israel, and we invest exclusively in early stage Israeli cybersecurity startups. I'm sure that you're familiar at least with some of our portfolio companies, such as Axonius, Orca Security, Medigate, Hunters, Vulcan Cyber, and a few others. I would also like to announce that our moderator for today's panel, Andy, who is the former Chief Security Officer of Akamai, officially joined Wild Ventures team today as an operating partner, and we're very excited. We're very excited for that, Andy, and we officially welcome you on board. Andy was one of our first venture advisors. He joined the program almost 4 years ago. The program now consists more than 90 global CSOs and cybersecurity executives from Fortune 500 companies and high growth companies in the US and globally. Andy has been working with us and with Israeli cybersecurity entrepreneurs, some from our portfolio and some not. And he will continue to do so even further and share his experience and guide Israeli entrepreneurs pre-investment and post-investment with ideation, market validation, product development, strategy, vision, and basically providing a lot of depth and understanding regarding customer needs. We hope that you will gain meaningful insights and different perspectives from the panel today, and I'm sure that you will enjoy it. So thank you very much, and with that, I will let Andy take it from here.
Thank you, Ofer, and thanks everyone for attending. Being joined by a couple of fantastic folks today. And we're going to talk a little about the challenges of scaling security programs, from seed to lead. From you're a small company, you're going to have high growth. As Ofer mentioned, today I start as an operating partner at Wild Ventures, which I'm pretty excited about. But before that, I spent 20 years building the security program for Akamai, a company that I hope a few of you have heard about. And so I've got some insights there that I'll share, but mostly I'm going to be asking for Talha and Karthik's insights. As we go along, if you'd like to ask a question, feel free to use the Q&A function of Zoom. I'll be monitoring that, and that will help guide our discussion. If not, I've got a laundry list of questions that I'm going to be asking these two to share with us. So first, let each of them introduce themselves for a few moments. So Talha, we'll begin with you.
Thank you, Andy. Hi, my name is Talha. I'm the Chief Security Officer at HashiCorp. Been with HashiCorp for about 2 years. Been in the industry for about 15 years. My previous experience was at Microsoft, PwC, and a few startups in Silicon Valley.
Excellent. Karthik?
Hey, everyone. I am Karthik Rangarajan. I'm a current principal engineer, former director of security at Robinhood. I've been with the company for over 4 years. I was the first security engineer. I helped build out the team, and I'm now in the trenches along with them.
Excellent. So I'm going to start with sort of an open-ended question, which is really, what are the top 3 challenges that you've faced, when you're trying to build a security program, but both from the ground up and then scaling them? And I think sometimes people, to give some insight here, what were the choices you had to make early that sometimes you then had to change as you scaled?
Yeah, I can start. So a couple of themes that I was experiencing when I joined HashiCorp, one of them was everything was a gigantic scale problem. And what I mean by that is, yes, you have large companies like Google and Microsoft, they have scale issues, but when you are a tiny company and you are experiencing really high growth, your scale problems are similar because your number of people are also like very, very small compared to the problems you're experiencing. We grew from 400 to 1,000 people in about 18 months, from operating in 1 country to 17 countries in about 18 months. So in that context, when you had high customer growth, high employee growth, high product growth, you have to think at least 2 to 3 years ahead with very little data of what kind of things you will experience 2-3 years from now. So mostly as I was building my team, I was security hire number one, like Karthik, and I was chartered to build a function from ground up. Most of it was a scale challenge and looking to what kind of team we would need to have 2 to 3 years from now and setting the foundations earlier. So that was challenge number one. Challenge number two, we were popular in the practitioner developer DevOps space. We were popular in enterprise too, but from branding perspective, people know more about our products than what HashiCorp is. And in some sense, I got this challenge of branding. It's like, hey, what is HashiCorp? I know Terraform, I know Vault, but what is HashiCorp? Like, what are you related? And the way this translates back in hiring is you're basically competing with the same tier one talent with large cloud companies. Because what we are building is infrastructure software. It's serious enterprise software. This is not, some experimental tech. We have a lot of Fortune 1000, Global 1000 companies using our products for running their infrastructure. And the kind of talent that we needed was tier one talent across the globe. So those were two challenges that I had. The third challenge, which some people thought was a challenge before pandemic, was being able to hire remote and have a team remote. For us, it was different because our company was remote from day one. So that actually worked very well in my favor, where we had to hire 20, 30 people in the last 6 months. And it was actually very easy to go after talent globally distributed that could solve large scale problems for us.
Yeah, I'll take a shot at that. A lot of what Talha said, obviously, I resonate with. I think at Robinhood, it was an interesting challenge. When I first joined, the company was pretty small. We were already pretty popular in the markets for our customers. The challenge was figuring out which security customer I make happy first. So security has many customers. You have engineers, you have regulators, you have executives, you have the board, you have your actual customers. So which of these customers do I cater to first in order to help scale this program? And what will give us the highest ROI as the company scales? And what will help me hire more? What will help me build the culture that will actually sustain the security program over time when the company is 1,000 people? And so I, at that point, made the choice of serving engineering customers before thinking about any other customers, given that the company was still small, and was the DNA of the company. We were an engineering firm that was innovating in the space, and so I said, okay, let's serve our engineering customers. Let's figure out how to work with them, how to think like them, how to act like them, and then we'll start steering this ship in the direction we want to go, and starting to think about how we can tell the story of what our engineers are doing, what this firm is doing to other customers, whether it be regulators, the board, our users, whatever it might be. How do we tell that story effectively? But in order to tell that story, you need to be part of the story. So that was one of those things that we had to decide very early on is, do you function like an engineer that is part of helping build a product, ship the product? Do you act as a check and balance? What persona of security do you play? And 4 years ago, I made the choice of playing the persona of, I am an engineer in the trenches shipping products with you. Let's see how we can make this secure and fast.
Yeah, I really like that approach, Karthik. You have to pick somebody you're going to work with first, and it's always easier if your product is secure to then deal with your customers and marketing to really go and sort of sell that. And so I want to pivot sort of the next question to Talha, which is, have you seen sort of the similar model, and how do you scale your security teams as your DevOps and R&D teams are scaling so that you can continue to manage engineering security?
Great. Yeah, great question. So I'll give a really practical example too. So we started with open source products. We were building self-hosted products, and then we started building cloud managed products of the same product portfolio. At some point, our cloud team to security team was a 1-to-100 ratio. We had like one engineer trying to figure out between SRE and product security and DevOps and platform and product and analytics, how to figure out how to set myself up. Again, a perfect example of scale issue. But the way we approached this was two-front. One, security is a very relationship heavy game. You have to go and figure out who are your partners, who are your allies, who can you influence to get your job done. Some you might do, some you might go and ask. So part of that exercise was like really good relationship building with the key stakeholders. That's like 30-40% of the job. I think probably 100% of the job, but that's how much time you're spending. The other piece, which we quickly realized, was there are two ways this would work and scale. One, we influence and ask what we need in a meaningful way with the right phases of things. And two, rather than just going and asking with like, hey, you got to go do this for me, what we realized was let's make their life easy by building the tools for them. So we quickly realized, like, when you say security engineering, what does that really mean? It could mean many things depending on the company. But the way we approached this was, okay, these are the problems we'll ask you to solve. Let me solve this problem for you and give you the tooling. So we started building a tooling team under my team, which was better access control libraries, better auditing, automation of compliance evidence, tooling. A really good example was when we started, we have 9 different teams with their own stack of this is my OS, this is my dependencies, this is I'm going to patch, monitor, harden. And you had to go to 9 teams and say, hey, here is my monitoring thing called OS query. Can you bake this in? And what we said was, stop all of this. We will develop the whole pipeline of the OS image build out and roll out. And said, hey, everybody, you don't need to patch, manage, harden, configure anything. Here is an AMI, go use it. And when you cover that, you basically solved everybody's problems. And people appreciate that too. So a lot of it is like just figuring out how to scale and what kind of problems you should solve, where you don't need to hire 10 more people to do the same thing.
Yeah, I really like that approach. It's similar to one I've always thought of doing and have done, which is not thinking of security as being separate from engineering and operations. Now I'd often sort of pivot on the other side and help them build that image so that everybody else could use it, because I never wanted to support it myself. But Karthik, so I want to give you sort of a related question around this. As we have this sort of operations, engineering, security triad that's sort of moving together, what are the places that you've seen challenges and tension in that scaling? That's something that worked at a small scale, maybe when there's 100 people in the company or 400, that might not work at 1,000. And how do you tackle those challenges?
Yeah, the by design programs are probably the best example here. As you can have a by design program when security by design, privacy by design, whatever it might be. When you're like a 200, 300% company, it's not that difficult to roll it out. Probably know every product manager, every engineer by name. You probably know every operations person by name. You can just, especially pre-pandemic, you could just walk over to their desk and be like, hey, what's the problem? Can we just figure this out? When you're 1,000 people, people don't know you, you don't know them. And anytime, and there's already so much red tape, right? There's already, even to the point where they have to write the PRD, they've had to get a whole bunch of approvals. Now they have the PRD. Now they start building, and then they hear about this by design thing that they have to now do. And they have to go to talk to yet another team before they have to ship their product. So now you go from being this, culture where shipping a product was this really, like, you joined the company because you ship products really fast and you're really agile and it's really quick, to there's a long tail of process that you have to follow in order to do it. So the challenge for security teams is, how do you not become part of the problem? How do you not create red tape? How do you continuously morph your culture to encourage behavior change? And that's kind of been my mantra almost, is don't necessarily describe the process, don't tell why, just talk about how you change behavior so that this is now the safe default. It isn't a checkbox you have to do. This is, you're getting value out of this. One way that we've been able to kind of get the cultural buy-in is by running products and services ourselves. Like, we started with the same approach as Talha here, which is, hey, we're going to ship the secure baselines. We're going to make sure we provide these libraries. And then we realized we had to take it one step further. We're going to use them and support production services that we are now serving users with our products and services. And we can prove that this works at scale. And also, we're eating our own dog food. We are following these processes too. We're not asking you to do something we don't do. So
that's
we're
a
eating our
great
own
point.
dog food.
Yeah, the number of security teams that I've worked with that you have this rigorous process for everybody to follow, but they themselves never follow it when deploying things. That's like the death of any process, because nobody's going to take that one seriously. And that leads into one of my favorite topics, which is, how do you hire and how do you build an organization at scale? And I've always found that probably the first non-security, I'm going to put quotes around that, the person who's not a security engineer, the first one you should hire is a good program manager who can actually sort of help build those relationships for you. At Akamai, that was actually security person number 3 when we were down, only had 3 security people because that was a better force multiplier than another engineer. But how have you worked to sort of manage, growing your team, navigate, when do you change your leadership roles? Who's going to be in your team as you're starting to scale? And what's your secret that you would share, that makes your team different from who you've chosen to hire?
I'll take a first shot at that. For me, I agree with the program manager hire, and I wish I'd known that 4 years ago, Andy, when I first started hiring for my team. But we eventually got there. I think TPM was hire number 6 for me on the team, because there were, for many of the reasons you described, but also because I realized that program management wasn't what I was strongest at. I was more of an engineer archetype than a program manager archetype. But for hiring, we started I'll call it the traditional way, which is, hey, let's find these infrastructure security engineers, these CorpSec engineers, these AppSec engineers. And very quickly, I realized I wouldn't be able to hire fast enough to support the scale of growth at the company, because all the people I was looking for were unicorns. I was looking for people that had security expertise, that could also write code, that could also build things. They don't exist. Or if they exist, it takes 6 months to hire them. And as a quickly growing company and the team, you just don't have the ability to wait that long to hire people. And so we made what at that point may have been somewhat of a risky decision, but since then, lots of companies have gone in this direction, which was hire software engineers that have some security expertise, but aren't security experts. And that was predominantly what the team was staffed with for the first 7 or 8 people. Like, I had maybe 2 security engineers, but 6 software engineers that were interested in security, had a lot of security expertise, but weren't necessarily your traditional security experts. But they could build and ship production quality things. And that was huge for us, because that helped us raise our hand up and say, hey, you want to ship this product when this has security implications? Let us do it for you, because we have the engineers to support this. And that's been the guiding philosophy for us ever since, which is, let's hire the best person for the job, whatever that person looks like. And that has also helped us build somewhat of a diverse team. Is we're not looking for very specific archetypes. We're looking for people that are able to solve a problem for us. In terms of managing, like, when do you find the right leaders? When do you promote the right leaders or convert the right leaders? I think that's going to be the most challenging thing for any high growth business. Some people will raise their hand up and will have a rocket ship trajectory. Others will raise a hand up, and then you realize that's not the trajectory they want, and they realize that too. So there'll be people that will rise up to a people manager, then you realize they were better as tech leads. There will be people that raise up as tech leads that are better as people managers, and so on and so forth. So you have to make some tough choices as a leader of this group. You have to be rational, empathetic, and kind of very logical about it all. And I think that's the hardest part of the job, is you have to make these really difficult choices of, what at what point do you do the thing that is right for the business to scale? And at what point do you say, okay, I'm going to take this risk. I'm going to let this fail, whether it's human, process, team, whatever it might be. And then I think the biggest thing I'll say where I think I found success was hiring people that were way better at a given thing than I would ever be. Like for my team, for instance, I needed somebody to run trust and safety. I hired Samantha Davison because like, who else is going to be better at that than her? I was like, okay, cool, come do this, build a team, go run this. And then I will say it for another thing too. Like when I realized this program was scaling really quickly and needed to scale even more, we ended up hiring Caleb Sima because I said, we need a CISO that has done this before, and I might not be that person. So let's hire somebody that is. So I would look at it both ways. Like I think for me, sort of leaving your personal ego and whatever at the table and looking at what is right for the business is going to be really important.
That's great. Talha, do you have anything to share on how you sort of build that team and scale it, and what was your special non-security or hire that you like to make sure you do?
Yeah, so I'll touch on the TPM side, which I was not planning to hire, but I just got lucky, and there was a solutions engineer in the company. She was burned out by traveling. This was before pandemic, and she's like, I want to now have a security guy who's building a security team, so I want to try security. And she applied. She said, I'll just come help build out some of the functions. And she was great because she was with the company for 3-4 years, way longer than I am. She knew the culture, she knew the onboarding, she knew all the processes that didn't exist that needed to exist, and she helped me build that while I was focused on hiring and build out of the leaders. So that worked really well for me by accident, and I'm really appreciative of how that experience played out. The way I approached this was, since I had at least 30-40 size team in mind for the next 18 months or so, I started building out my leaders first, which was, let me hire my leaders who can help me scale up and build teams under them. Even though that might take longer, but then it's a logarithmic scale of like exponential support. So my strategy was hiring the leaders first for each of my large pillars, like security engineering and risk and compliance and detection tooling and CorpSec. So while I was hiring for leaders, I was also open, and I started hiring folks who would be early in the career or will actually do the work. And the way I balanced this out was, which are the teams where I can hire like an IC who will be productive because there is structure and support to help them succeed. So it was top down and bottoms up, and at some point these things merge. The fun things for us, which made my job a little easier, one was my first 7-8 people were actually from my network. They were either people who worked with me or used to work with me or wanted to work with me, which was very privileged to work with smart folks like them. That was really fantastic for year one. Given we are an open source company, there was a lot of like great inbound talent too, of folks like, I just want to go work on Vault. Like, do you have a role? And I was very flexible. Like, yes, programming, tooling, security, we will make a role for you. So you have to be like flexible for the right talent and not like box them in. That way they have some freedom and they can contribute to your company in other ways. So it was a combination of hiring from my network, inbound from the industry, and at some point this starts scaling in your favor.
No, I love those answers, and I'm a huge fan of sort of talent development. The one thing I would add is, as you're scaling, a lot of the people who are going to become your leaders are in your organization already, and there's sort of two, I'm not calling them tricks, they're just standard ways of doing management. One is, make sure that for everybody in your organization, you know what their next 2 jobs might be, so that you can start putting opportunities in front of them. Because a lot of times we wait for there to be an opportunity and then we try to guess who it might be relevant for, rather than already knowing who might be relevant, and be willing to take risks and provide gentle exits. We had a lot of people who are qualified, engineers and architects who said they wanted to try people management. So we gave them, 1 or 2 people for a year, and more than half of them at the end of that year were like, I'm done. I don't want to manage people. And we made it graceful. We said, great, you can go back to doing your individual contributor role. We still value you there. Whereas a lot of businesses sort of, once you take that leap into management, if you fail, you're out. And now you've lost both an individual contributor and you've possibly harmed whoever they were managing if you weren't putting good supports around that practice. But let's pivot a little bit off of people management and talk a little bit more about your overall strategy of a security program. And just for when we talk about security program, it's, what are the things you're choosing to do? What are you investing in? How are you going to run the company? How do you approach evaluating that program and understanding your risks and choosing the right risks? And how often do you want to sort of step back and reevaluate what you're doing and what you're choosing to focus on? So Talha, why don't you take this one first? Because we let Karthik have a long answer on the last one.
Sure. So one of the good things about HashiCorp, given we were remote first from day one, we use written form content a lot, and we run what we call RFCs. This is the IATF style RFCs, where you are starting a project and you want to enforce some systems thinking and alignment across the organization. Any large initiative starts with a document. You document your thought process, your strategy, you communicate this out. It goes to a list of 700 people, you get comments. There's a template where you're forced to write the trade-offs and you're forced to write your quote abandoned ideas. So it forces you to think and capture, whether it's a small project or a large project or your multi-year strategy, how do you build out and communicate that work? And that's reviewed formally 4 times a year, and at least once a year, you're expected to lay out your strategy and communicate and align your function along with the corporate strategy. So a lot of these tier 1 consulting companies, when they come into companies like, hey, this is how you should run the business. We had a really fantastic chief of staff working with the CEO. He built that structure for the company early days. So that construct helped align all the business to work together in terms of what does the company want, what are we achieving, how are we aligning this. So security strategy is a derivative of like what the company aspires to do and where they want to be, and it's basically supporting the business. So that part is working well. Where it starts getting challenging, obviously, is with the high growth, you have to align, you have to think through the phasing of some of these programs, what's foundational, what can come 6 months, 1 year later, things of those nature. High level, there's a strategic objective of what are the top 3 things we are hoping to accomplish: protecting customers, protecting our products, enabling trust in the ecosystem. Then those mission statements start getting down to each program level objectives of what is the outcome we are looking for this year, and reverse engineering what are the initiatives that will get you there. So for us, it's like we have 7 teams or 7 pillars in security, and they each work on their initiatives as bottoms up, aligning with the top level strategic ask. We run what we call a scorecard format, which is the same strategy in a very transparent, and it's transparent in the company. We expose our scorecard. This is what we said we would do. This is how we are doing quarter by quarter, with some metrics. Sometimes metrics may be hard, and that's okay, as long as the objective and outcome is communicated well. And yeah, that's what we are doing very transparently, at least 4 times a year.
Excellent. No, I really like that model of being very clear and transparent, and especially having it documented so you know why you made that choice a while ago. Karthik, I'm going to toss to you. As you look back, what's the worst choice that you made? And I'm not looking for like the vulnerability, but what's the choice that you made in building up your security program that if you could go back and say, God, I should have done it this way, I just didn't know better at the time? What would it have been?
Yeah, that's a great question. Man, I've built security programs twice, and every time I wish I could go back and change time, right? Or know the knowledge I have now. I actually think I would change the way I hired a little bit. It's not necessarily the strategy or anything of that sort. When I look back at what could have helped us function even better, it is hiring the right support structures for the teams. I didn't hire enough leaders. I didn't hire enough managers. I was too much of a fan of bottoms up building, and bottoms up building is great, but it doesn't necessarily work for a company that's scaling super fast. And it is, at that time, I thought it was risky to bring in a fresh new leader into this culture and have them on board and have them figure things out. But I think in the long run, it's riskier to have 20 people reporting to you or reporting to somebody else than it is to bring in a new leader that has to figure out how to onboard and how to grow with the team. So I think that is fundamentally something I would change if I were to do this again. Is bring in leaders a little bit more aggressively than I did before. From a more strategic point of view, I think we took the philosophy of we're going to build this and we're going to run this a little too far sometimes. We decided to build and run this, which I will stand by that decision forever, but we forgot that it needs to be staffed with the same rigor as a product team or a service team, which means that it needs to have a 4-person deep on call, and that once you ship it, you still have to support it. You can't just go work on some other project that you need to, because security, there's always something else to work on. You can't ever just stop after you do this thing. And so what we ended up doing is we went from problem A, okay, we ship problem A, let's go to problem B. And we never really built, we've since done it, but at that point, in the early days, there were just one person managing 5 different services. And it really doesn't, while it works in a small company, it doesn't scale.
Yeah, at some point you sort of get trapped under that weight. Talha, what's your takeaway lesson that you would do over if we were given do-overs?
Yeah, so I think the 2 things I can touch on, which were challenging for me and my team, were actually less to do with my team and more around what is the ecosystem support I need outside my team. One great example is like IT. Like our IT is still relatively immature compared to the organization needs. And if you look at the interface back to employees, IT is the help desk, IT is the interface. They are helping with password resets, they're helping with policy enforcement on endpoints, they're helping with email security problems and whatnot. And we knew that function was a little bit weaker, but it was basically helping scale up that function that should have scaled up as employee base was increasing. So it's a combination of like structure and support. Yep, IT is your big ally and stakeholder. These systems need to scale up appropriately for security to function and employee base function. The other piece I will touch on is, different teams talk about different philosophies and cultures about guardrails versus gates. And it's not one or the other. You have to find the balance of sometimes, yes, we talk about these in the motivate versus mandate constructs. And yes, we do want to motivate people. We do want them to operate safely. But yes, there may be some times where you put a line and say, that is a hard mandate. You will not go past that line. And it took us a couple of mistakes to basically say, yes, we need to define a mandate for certain things. And this also addresses, Andy, your question that you asked earlier about, like, how do you scale? Like, at some point when your human interaction will not scale to the size of the organization, what is that framework you define where you allow people to operate safely, and when they're making risk decisions, they know a very clear line not to cross that, and whatever that definition is, like compliance mandate or regulatory framework, or like you will not ship with X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. Defining that gate or a mandate is like super important, and you'll have to find what's the balance for your company.
Yeah, a related one near that was I had to learn one of the people I would delegate to. Whenever people would push too hard, it would get escalated to me, and I would always overrule. And he pointed out to me once, he said, every time you overrule me, you ensure that they're going to escalate again. And so we actually had a different rule, which said, look, if you can negotiate it with him, you have more flexibility. That as soon as you escalate, you get a dogmatic answer. and because we're spending expensive time at that point, so it must clearly be risky. And that was a fascinating learning for me that made the people that I delegated work to much more effective, because people would learn that if you escalated, you got a worse deal than if you could just work something out. I gave them more flexibility. So let's pivot a little and talk about solutions. I think Karthik talked about, self-building, and of course, every startup out there wants to sell to every one of us. For me, it got so bad I had a vendor template that I could just reply, and it was my signature that said, "No, please go away." But we didn't say no to everybody. So, I'm curious, two things. And the first is, sort of what are the partners, could be a product, could be a service, that have been really valuable for you as you built out your security program and grown? And what were the products? And I don't want the names on this one because I don't want to throw anybody under a bus. But what were the places that you might have partnered too early, that you might have looked for a solution that really wasn't going to work for you? And while you two think about that one, I'll give sort of some examples from my own. I will certainly say that one of the most powerful services I've ever used was outside assessors, whether it was for compliance activities or red teams, penetration testing, just to be able to have somebody else write down the things that I might have been saying, but that it always brought in more credibility when speaking with sort of an engineering team. One of my favorites for that was White Hat Security a while ago, because they had this fantastic thing that they would say, this web app is in the 9th percentile of security among our customers, and nothing is more embarrassing to an engineer at that point. And they're like, great, how do I get to 90th percentile? And I think for some of the things taken on too early would be standardized training packages, trying to scale out a security awareness program with content that really wasn't personalized for us, that actually almost harmed us. That people would look at it and they're like, you clearly don't care about security if you're just going to outsource teaching me to somebody who doesn't even know what we do. So in that vein, let's give your takes on that one.
I'll start. I swear I'm not doing this because Talha is here, but HashiCorp actually helped us a lot. And I think, especially for scale, you'll have I'll play the flip side too. You'll have a lot of scaling challenges with some of the HashiCorp products as you grow and scale, especially if, in the early days, you didn't necessarily think of it. But I think for any company that's trying to figure out secrets management, that's trying to figure out, standardized infrastructure management, you can't do better than Terraform and Vault at this point. So HashiCorp was definitely super helpful. The open source products, not going to speak for the enterprise versions. I think also partnering with some very early stage companies that kind of helped, that we could be design partners for, that we could guide the direction of, to give us what we needed. And this is more for maybe the privacy program than the security program, but Transcend that we worked with to help kind of bootstrap our GDPR and CCPA compliance, where we started working with them pretty early, pre-Series A, helped us build the right things. There were a couple of others, Cytal and others, that we sort of worked with very early to help guide the product direction so that we had what we needed to achieve our goals. We basically got engineers on our team, basically, to help us try what we needed. Products too early, I think I'll cop out here, Andy, and choose the same answer you gave, which is a standardized training program. We did go with that very early. It was a pretty, we did try to do something that was kind of innovative, but it took 10 hours of an engineer's time to deliver this training across a 300-person company. And, it wasn't great. And the concept itself was super appealing, but it was probably too early and it wasn't the right thing for us.
Talha, do you have any vendors you loved or product areas that weren't very helpful?
Yeah, both your examples really resonated with me. Our best outside vendor is our external assessor. Huge shout out to Trail of Bits. I am not related. I have zero incentives. but they have been really fantastic to work with. And my team loves them, our partner teams loves them, and we consider them part of like our extended security team. So that was the biggest value add in terms of the external vendor. If I reflect back last 2 years, training MS also resonated with me. The same thing. We bought some packaged content from a training vendor. We rolled it out, and we had some fun commentary about like the diversity and inclusion aspects of some of the content in the training, and that didn't go really well. So we had to like really quickly pivot and figure out what do we need to do. So the way we approached this was some was canned content, and then we had one of our team members do a narrative on the background to like help reinforce the message. So it still felt like, all right, we have security team actually caring about security content. Switching to vendors, the way I like to think about vendors, and this may not work everywhere, but given the scale and priorities and how much time we can actually spend with vendors, we buy what is a known solved commodity problem. Like we need a logging platform. People knew how to use Splunk. We went with Splunk. We wanted an EDR. CrowdStrike was there. 5 of our peers said it's fine between Sentinel one. Like we picked one. It's like there's an established market. There's a known set of vendors. It's easy to like pick something that works, that can solve your 80-90% of the problem in terms of prevention or detection. So we buy what is a known solved problem. We build what is strategic to us around our product or service portfolio. So it's either something which we don't like exists in the market, so we'll build that. We will either build something that connects closely to our product ecosystem, and that's a strategic decision in terms of build out. We do engage vendors, all maturity, either like company who are just 2 people or 1 people, or company who is like late stage companies. The way I like to think about vendors is we partner for long term. I really want to look you in the eye and see, can I partner with you long term? Even your experiments might fail, even when your stuff might not work. Are you committed to help me and my team succeed in the long run? So we tend to partner with companies that are helping solve like either large strategic problems, or they are, disruption is an overloaded one, but even if you're trying to approach the problem with the ecosystem, it's just like, just make it better compared to what's out there already. And there are plenty of problems which you can optimize and build out. And some are like unsolved problems either. So it's a combination of things for us. We buy and partner with large established vendors, we build things, and we also partner with smaller companies. I think the biggest challenge for us, and this is a message to security startups out there, is you have to, whichever company you pick and sell to, you have to make sure you're able to scale with them, because that's the hardest part for us. If I'm putting you in the critical path of my customers, then you have to be able to scale with us. And that's where a number of companies have challenges, which is why we have to like de-risk ourselves and put them in like, okay, we'll keep working with you, but you cannot be in the critical path of our products and services.
I can't imagine a better set of words to wrap up on. And so that's perfect. So I'd like to thank both of you for your time today and being willing to share your wisdom here. For everybody who's attended, I hope this was valuable for you and useful. If you have questions, you'd like to follow up, you can find us on social media, and I'm certain the YL team will reach out as a follow-up as well. And we're always going to be providing great content like this, we hope. So thank you. Have a fantastic day, whether it's evening because you're on that side of the Atlantic, midday or mid-morning here on this side of the Atlantic, or if you're on the other side of the Pacific and you tuned in the middle of the night, we really appreciate your time. So thank you all very much.